Anyway, listen, going back to our story, that was the thing we did before we got driver's licenses. Well, there was something going on in that building in the 8th grade. Then we got into school over at the high school part. What all did we do over there? I can't remember all the things. I know one thing we did. I think he did. You know what cherry bomb is?
Yes, sir.
Okay. It was 2 floors over there, 3 floors. The favorite thing to do was to get ready to flush the John and throw the cherry bomb in it and flush it. And then it would go down into the main system and would blow the pipes apart. And if it happened to be near where your class was, you didn't have to go to class.
So, Tom, it's interesting. If y'all did that,
We did.
I didn't, but I knew about that all the way up in Richmond, Virginia. It's sort of like that information gets out to young boys
Yeah.
from generation to generation, geography to geography.
Yep.
It probably goes all.
And you know
Probably
the
tell
way
a story to
those
someone in Wisconsin, and they would know cherry bombs, yes.
Yep.
Plumbing, yes.
Yep.
We know about it. Isn't that fun?
and you know that old plumbing, you know, was put together, and you know you'd melt lead and put in it to hold it together. It didn't have real connections like the PVC pipes
Right.
and everything.
It was just-
So it didn't take much to blow them apart.
Yeah.
But that was the way you could get out of class for the day in that area, you know.
And go find the bathroom.
Yeah.
That could work.
But we talked about, should
That's
we
funny.
tell stories about Ernest Macon? Ernest was not, he was smart, you know, and he was the smart of our, well, he and Ellis, you know, they went on into the things that you gotta be really smart to go into. I just couldn't get by the math that you had to have. But Ernest was smart in most all ways, but most of the time he would tell you how smart he was, and that's what made him where you didn't really like him too much, you know.
Yeah.
So he belonged to everything you could belong to in the way of extracurricular things, you know, joining the Latin club and you know, whatever he was in. And so he was always coming after school with the car and parking it out front. And so we were sort of a muscular group for a good while. We would actually go down and pick his car up and set 2 wheels over on one side of the ditch and 2 wheels on the other side of the ditch.
Said, figure this out.
Yeah, where he parked, we'd leave it where he parked, but just move it over. And there's no way he could get it because he had to run a ditch, and it was a ditch that discontinued to go. So he didn't know. He'd, you know, call a record, you know, to come get him out. And we wouldn't say anything, and he wouldn't either because he didn't know who it was. But he would never admit that he had to do that. And then you remember the bomb we put in under his hood?
Yeah.
You can also buy at fireworks places these things you hook to 2 spark plugs, or maybe a spark plug in the ground. And when they start the car, it sparks and sets off an explosion.
Okay.
Now, it's apparently safe to do under the hood. It never did catch anything on fire, but it smokes real bad when you do it, so it makes you think your car's just blown up. And he did, of all the things he knew about, he didn't know anything about a motor.
Okay.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So we would sneak in while he was in the building, you know, rounding up to somebody. We'd put this thing on his ignition, and when he came out, it would go, pow, you know, and smoke comes out of it. And he still talks about that, and you still don't know who did it.
That's so funny.
The last time we got together was 2 years ago for the reunion. We stopped him at that point. And he said, I still am looking at you guys. I don't know who did it. But he said, whatever that bomb was used to put on my car, he said, I'd like to know which one of you did it. And he said, and here we are at the last get together, and I'm afraid to go out there and start my car. He said, I'm afraid you put one more on it, you know. And we didn't, nobody acknowledged that we did it.
Yeah,
We just looked at him and said, we heard about it, you know.
Yeah.
And that was it. But
That's good.
the one that I think was the funniest, we didn't do this one. We did a lot of other stuff, but we didn't do this one. The assistant principal at our school was named Jesse Buncannon. And he was always if you got caught doing anything, he would put you in they had a coal stoker, you know, for the big furnace that heated the school steam. And you had to load the stoker. It would feed it automatically, but you had to load the stoker. So if you did anything that was not supposed to be done, he would assign you so many minutes or hours shoveling coal into the stoker. That's the way he didn't have to hire anybody. There's enough of us goofing off. And anyway, he caught this one guy doing something. You remember his name? I don't. But he was not a goof off. He wasn't in our group at all. I mean, we were first to be called in when something happened, you know, to see where were you last night.
Right.
Type thing. Okay, we got called in one morning, and none of us were out that night. You know, we all had proof that we were home. So somebody had come and written across the front of the building. It's a brick building. I don't know if you ever been by where the old school that we went to school.
Yes, we have, haven't we, Holly?
Yeah, probably so.
I don't know.
It's over in Jamestown.
Yeah,
Not far from where the home place was.
Big old place, right?
Yeah. And somebody wrote with white paint, Jesse is an SOB, across the front of the building, on the bricks.
Is a what?
SOB. You know? And so, you know, of course, people started coming in that morning, there it was, and everybody's laughing, and Jesse's mad. Anyway, they called the cops out, and they ran all of us by. What were you doing last night? We all were covered. And then we go to the juniors, and we knew who the ringleader was in the juniors, junior year. We said, did you guys do this? And this guy named Mike Lee, he was the head of that group, sort of. And you'd ask him, and he would just go, do what? We said, you know, Mike, he did it. You can tell he did it. And he took credit for doing it, sort of. He never said he did, but when all of us would ask him, we'd say, well, how did you do it? Because it was up 2 floors, you know. You couldn't do it with ladders, you know. Anyway, I'd always thought somebody had something mechanical. So every year we had a class reunion. He and I were running most of them. I would get up and say, look, we're beyond the period of time, what do you call it?
Statute.
Yeah, beyond the statute of limitations here. Nobody can get arrested for it or anything. Who painted Jesse's and SOB's on the front of the building? Nobody would ever answer. Finally, the next, well, maybe 10 years before we stopped our get together, this guy said, I did. The last guy in the building you would think would. They never raised any hell anywhere, you know, didn't get into any junk. And we said, why did you do it? And he said, I had to shovel coal that day, and I didn't do what he said I did, and it made me mad. I said, okay, now how did you do it? He lived almost in the city of Greensboro, and it's what was it, that time, a rural fire department, and they had a cherry picker. And he volunteered to sleep there on the weekends. You know, the guy, it was volunteers, so nobody was there except the one person that slept there. And he volunteered on the weekends. So on his own, he goes down and cranks up the cherry picker and goes up and parks it, and you can, you know, just move it every time you need to write some more. And you know, you can move the bucket without moving the truck for a long ways. He said it didn't take me long. And he said, I did it, and he called one of his friends that was on the fire department and said, I need you to come down here, fill in for me. I'm gonna be gone for a few minutes.
Okay.
And he goes back to school and paints all this thing on, comes back, folds the cherry picker back up, puts it where it was, never mentioned it to anybody.
This was the fire truck.
Yeah, the cherry picker. You know,
Yeah,
they have a cherry picker, you know, to get people out of the second floor or something like that. And he goes off by himself in that thing now in the middle of the night. And does that, and so
that's
and
incredible.
It answered all the questions we had. See, we were just, you know, he's an engineer here, and he couldn't figure out how they did it.
Ropes and pulleys
whoever
and
this
things.
crowd was, so
Amazing.
But we were always into something, and my father was on the school board, and your mom was in a whole bunch of stuff at the school. I don't remember what all she was in. I think she was head of the PTA a couple of years, wasn't she? So we were not the kind of people that should be in these hell-raising groups because our parents were in things that we shouldn't, you know, be doing this and embarrassing them. So we never got caught, but they would never push us but so far because, you know, the principal would say, look, this guy comes from a nice family and his parents really support us a lot, so don't push too far. So we never got pushed too far, but we never did anything to get really in trouble, just fun trouble, you know. But we wore our pants. Remember, we wore our pants wrong side out for a week.
A week.
Yeah, and you know, we just do stuff that they didn't want us to do at school. You went down there a lot because you went to the lake.
Yeah.
But now I did mine at Shackford's, which was the one place in Greensboro. Greensboro had the Boone's tailoring, and then High Point had Shackford's. But there was a place in Lexington, and they had the lake place.
Okay.
And so he was always going back and forth there. He could get his done at a better deal than he got mine done. Now, everybody didn't wear that, but what we wore mostly then was probably, did we wear khakis a lot? And
I don't remember.
I think the poor people wore khakis.
Maybe.
What year was senior graduation, just to give me a reference?
61.
61.
Excuse me, 57.
57, okay.
Yeah. But I know, you know, it was a challenge to see who could come in with pants that had something extra on them. You know, you had your back pocket flaps. We had a three-way when we designed there, you know, it had 3 buttons.
Okay.
You know, so there was the point on each side and a point in the middle.
Okay.
And then we had some that had a point on the pockets here. And we had them draped down to, what, smallest drape you ever got, maybe 8 inches or something. You had to turn your foot down to get it through the bottom, you know. But these were, at that time, this was wool fabric.
Okay.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
the worsted wool. I mean, it was top of the line stuff.
So this was the main high school, right? I'm just wondering if other schools, seniors had this
Well,
sort
see,
of
we
thing
were the
going
only
on?
one because it was a country high school.
Okay.
And it wasn't like a town where you got more than one high school.
Okay.
The nearest other school that was high school was probably where? They changed that high school. What other county school was a high school?
Well, yeah, Trinity.
Yeah, Trinity, which is a long ways.
Yes.
Yeah. It was the other side of High Point, way down, you know, like you're going towards Asheboro. And we were between Greensboro and High Point. So,
When the other school sports teams came by, or you went to the other school for sports, were other kids doing some tailoring also, or is it
I don't
just
think
sort of
so. I think that was mostly us, don't you
to
think?
y'all? Yeah.
What?
Just
We
curious.
did, the other schools like Rankin and Trinity, I don't think they had anybody wearing tailored pants down there, did they?
Okay.
They were mostly more country than we were.
Okay.
Being halfway between Greensboro and High Point, we didn't get as countrified as some of the country schools.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
And then, I don't remember what else we did. I mean, all we did really is when he got his license first. But you're not much older than me. You're like a month older than me. January, and I'm September, okay. He's 4 months older. He did get a car before I did. My dad said, you're gonna have to work, I'll help you, you know, but you're gonna have to work and get you some money. So I don't know when I got mine, but anyway, we double dated all the time. And that's one thing I'm gonna tell on him, because he scared me to death. He and Pat were in the front seat of the car, and my wife to be and me were in the back seat. And we're riding along, and he just said, I think I'll just slide over and maybe kiss my girlfriend or whatever it was. He slid over while we were riding and said, you take the wheel, Tom. And I'm in the back seat. I jump up and I got the wheel. Now, if you don't think you feel funny, you're driving the car here, but you got no control over the speed or the stopping of it. And I worried for a minute, and then I said, okay, you got it back. And I sat back down, and he slid back over and took back over. But that one scared me to death.
Bill, you're a rascal, man.
He was a rascal when he was younger. God, yes.
Well, I remember the time, and it was a little long kid drive.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you were coming this way.
Taylor, yeah. I was coming one way, you coming the other way.
And I don't know who did it first, but one of us switched lanes.
At pretty high speed.
And the other one did the same. And so here we are passing each other,
On the wrong side of the road.
wrong side of the road, at 80 miles an hour.
And neither one of us had even thought about it ahead of time, and never thought about what if you check it out before you get there.
Yeah.
We just, each one saw each other, and we just flipped.
Just did it.
And later we thought about, God, what if we chickened out and gone back to our original position, and the other one didn't, you know, we were in bad shape.
Yeah.
But I lived out on Cubic Drive. My dad had a grocery store out there, and we lived next to the grocery store. And then Pat lived, what, about a mile back towards town,
Yeah.
off of the same street. So we, you know, we ran into each other even after I got in the car. And all we did was go to High Point and drag up and down Main Street.
Yep.
You know, we called it Dragon Main. And there were 3 places to stop and get hamburgers or hot dogs, you know, whatever. I can't remember the name. One was Toot and Tail.
Toot and tail.
Yeah.
Sounds like something for a car.
Yeah.
Too, you know.
Yeah. And what was the one that's up on North End? It was a good one.
I don't know.
And there was one down towards Trinity, down towards the south end of town. But so you just went from one to the next, then turn around and go back. And you went to find your buddies, you know, find who was there. They were with their girlfriend and parked, and you know, you'd get out talking. And the other thing we used to do was we'd go to drive-in movies. One night we talked Bill and Pat into getting in the truck, and we were going to sneak them in. And I paid and went on through the, you know, the gate, and I said, and then I stopped and I said, "No, sir. There's not anybody in." Real loud, I said, "There's nobody in our trunk." No. Well, if you insist you could, well, we knew they were hearing us, and then we're gonna be back there scared to death. And that we had gotten to where we were gonna park, and we opened the truck and let them out. That's was my excuse. Right behind my house, we had next door neighbors, they had a horse. And I used to go down and talk to the horse all the time because their fence came up to our property line. And of course, the horse would just come over, you know, to talk.
And listen to you.
Yeah. But I never got on a horse, but I think I maybe got on one time in my life, really. It's just,
They're way up there, actually, when you sit on the back of a horse.
yeah.
You're up there.
Well, maybe he was getting out of his horse phase at that point.
Yeah,
'cause-
well, also, I was gonna ask you, come on,
Oscar.
wasn't there a lake up this way that y'all used to come to before you bought the property down at down at High Rock? I'm thinking I remember that your family would come up here and stay on the lake somewhere up in here near Wilkesboro, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
It's a state reservoir or something.
Don't remember.
Okay, I used to remember the name of it. And I thought you came like every year for 2 or 3 years. I thought maybe that's when you got into the desire to have a lake place, and then you got the place down at High Rock. And we used to go to High Rock now, together, when they had the boat down there. And, you know, they had do you ever see that? Did they have it at all?
I never saw that house.
Okay, well, anyway, it was a small house, but they built this huge screened-in porch on it, which became the living area, you know. You want it to be nice weather when you go down there. And we all slept on, and he'd invite a crowd down there for that. You know, there might be 4 or 5 of us. But we all slept out on either the glider or a little, we had all kind of things we slept on out there.
Were his parents there when you
Yeah.
were?
Yeah, that
was
was-
High Rock.
Yeah, that was the house at High Rock. They wouldn't let us go to the house without them being there. But he had a really nice boat.
Cassie?
I don't remember the name of the boat.
Well, he had this old wooden boat out in the barn when we were growing up, and it had Cassie painted on the side.
Well, the one you had was like a water ski type boat, full of water skiers, right?
Yeah,
Like they have it in Florida.
yeah.
That's what I was thinking. It was an inboard one. Inboard,
No,
was it?
outboard.
Okay.
And John and Laurie still have it.
Oh, they do? Okay. Okay, well, anyway, we used to go down and, you know, try to water ski. He taught me a little bit about water skiing, but I could get up and fly, but they would lose me when they made a turn and you got to going real fast. I'd always fall. Cause you know, you
speed up.
You go really fast.